You would do the same. But would you? I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now, brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And Bill, those are the words of Senator Lindsey Graham, who's in a re-election battle right now, and he is telling his Democrat colleagues in the Senate that given the opportunity to rush through the confirmation of a Supreme Court justice before they risk losing power for their party, Democrats would most certainly rush it, just like Republicans seem to be doing right now. And Bill, we talked about this a little bit on the most recent episode of Bill Whittle Now. And now on this, the nominally 500th episode of the show, I'd like to delve a little deeper into the ethical question, especially for a party and for a people that propounds to be people of principle, where the rule of law not only matters, but that where a man's word is his bond. And what does this say about us going forward? And specifically, Senator Graham, as well as Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, both said in the past, when they were holding up a vote on President Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland, that given the same situation where an election year was happening at a time when a court vacancy existed, that they would say the same thing to a Republican president, say, we're going to stall this nomination until after the people have spoken. And now they're just basically saying, well, yeah, that's what I said then. I'm saying this now. We certainly constitutionally can do this, and we're going to do it. Bill, you just wonder whether anybody of honor would want to go into a business like this.
Oh, that just take that as read. But the thing that's changed between those two positions, because they clearly are different positions, and when they were trying to block Obama's nominee, they said it's an election year, let's let the people decide. Now we're much closer to the election. They're saying we're going to do it anyway. So what happened between those two events? Well, Brett Kavanaugh happened between those two events. That's what happened. And that's what turned Lindsey Graham from kind of a good old boy from the great state of this, and my colleague, the distinguished gentleman from the great state of that, turned him into a warrior. And the same for Mitch McConnell, and the same for everybody, and me especially. What we saw there was the most repellent thing I've seen in my life, and I no longer fight by the same rules that I would have fought with before. And I always come back to this question in terms of the morality of it. I always come back to the Marines' experience on Guadalcanal, where they treated the Japanese and offered to accept their surrender and went to help them when they were wounded. And they would have a wounded soldier, and he'd pull a grenade and he'd kill 4 corpsmen, and then they'd go to rescue the Japanese off of this island, and they're waving their white flag of surrender, and then the Marines would come, and then they'd drop the flag and machine gun them all and hack their arms off with samurai swords. So after something like that happens, your attitude towards the people that you're opposed to changes, and you realize, okay, if I continue to play by the rules while they don't, then good people are going to lose, and if good people lose, then there's no point in having a civilization. What McConnell is doing, what Graham is doing, what all of them are doing, and what I am doing is basically saying we saw the level that you will go to. We saw your disrespect, forget disrespect, your contempt for the structure of this country in terms of how it's operating. We've seen your utter disdain for its institutions. We saw Harry Reid destroy the tradition of the filibuster. We saw, the majority vote. We saw all of it. And now we realize we're at war with people who are trying to destroy the system. And so now we're dealing with it the way the Marines dealt with the Japanese after they had some experience fighting with the Japanese.
Now, Bill, you always jump to a warfare analogy when we're talking about the difference between Republicans, and I shouldn't say always, because that's a sweeping generalization. Every last time you jump to a warfare analogy when we're talking about politics. And Bill, it seems to me that that's the point of no return, and you passed it a long time ago. There's no dialing that back. There's no saying that the Japanese are our friends until we crush them.
I didn't pass it. They passed it.
Well, they would argue that they were reacting to something you did. You know how that works.
Oh, really? So the Brett Kavanaugh character assassination was a result of something that Bill Whittle said? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, not you specifically, but the Democrats will always do the same thing Republicans do, which is say the reason why we're reacting so harshly is because Republicans did this to us, and Democrats did that to us.
This thing began with Robert Bork And the person who led the charge against him was Joe Biden. And he fully knew, the same way that we knew with Kavanaugh, that these charges were false. And he went with them anyway, because that's what they do. And after watching this for 40 years now, 50 years, I realized, okay, fine, I understand now. I didn't do it. I accepted loss of the presidency twice, and I fought them on an ideological basis, and I fought them fair. And I still continue to fight them as fair as I am allowed to fight them. But I've seen what they have done, and I've seen what they're doing with the voter fraud. I've seen what they're doing with the entire idea of an election day. I have friends out here who have friends who've already voted. No debates, they've already voted. Why would they wait till election day to vote? Vote early and vote often. That's the Democratic strategy, and I am tired of dealing with people.
Are your friends voting often, Bill?
They're not my friends.
No, you said you have friends out here who have already voted early. Are they voting often as well?
I have friends who are liberals. I have friends who have friends who are liberals who have already voted.
Are they planning to vote more than once?
I don't know whether they are or not. That's not the point.
But what I'm saying is you're characterizing that entire party as people who vote early and vote often, but a lot of people just vote early.
I'm not saying that every Democrat votes early and often, but I am saying that it wasn't Republican candidates that suddenly showed up with boxes of ballots that were 100% in favor of Al Franken. It wasn't that didn't happen for Republicans. It didn't happen. There was never a case where Republicans delayed a vote and kept recounting and counting and counting and counting and counting and kept having new boxes of votes just suddenly appear until finally they got over the limit, and then we stopped counting right there.
So you're saying that this party that has been the only bad actor in the system, the party that is supported by roughly half the American people, is so utterly corrupt that the only solution is that we must absolutely crush them. Then what are half the voters suddenly
That's exactly
say,
right.
hey, I agree with Republicans now?
You got it. You got it in a nutshell. That's exactly right. Because it wasn't the Republicans. It wasn't... The Republicans lost a close election in 1960, where there was significant evidence of voter fraud in 1960. And the Republican candidate, who probably won that election, decided that rather than tearing the country apart, Richard Nixon decided, he said, well, okay, there it is. I can either tear the country apart and have a rematch, or I can just let it go. So he walked away from it. In 2000, when Al Gore lost the mechanical vote in Florida, he had the right to have a recount with the mechanical machine that does the counting, and he lost that recount too, period. But that wasn't enough for them. They had to go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And now they're holding up these chads to see which way it went. And once they lost that, they never gave George Bush a moment of legitimacy in the same way they've never given Donald Trump a moment of legitimacy. He won the election, but they don't care. Democracy does not work for these people. When they win, they crow about democracy, and when they lose, they do everything in their power to utterly undermine it, including and especially encouraging people to go out and burn down the cities that they happen to be in charge of, full well knowing that they're not going to enforce any kind of law enforcement against these people. So yeah, Scott, that's where we are.
Does half the country not realize the kind of party that you just described? Do they not realize they're in that party?
We're going to find out in about 6 weeks.
Let me ask you just specifically on this issue, because what is interesting to me is not so much whether you approve of the tactics that the Republicans are taking right now. The issue really is a man's word a man's word, or is situational ethics more important than a man's word? And you can say, well, I said that. In fact, Lindsey Graham not only said that he would delay approval or confirmation of a presidential nominee until after the election had transpired, he said, use my words against me. And now they are using his words against him. But it just seems like there was a day, at least, when a man of honor would say, you know what, I realize that things have changed since then. My opponents are just like Bill Whittle describes. They're these nefarious characters who always do the wrong thing. They cheat, they lie, they steal. But I don't. I keep my word. We will let the American people speak. That would sound so insane to hear today, wouldn't it?
It would be an insane thing to say today, because you would be appealing to a sentiment that doesn't exist. You would be playing fair with people who don't play fair, and that would guarantee that you would lose. And you are, look, in World War II, we fought the Germans and we fought the Japanese. And the Japanese fought one way and the Germans, I'm not talking about the SS, I'm talking about the Wehrmacht, fought in a different way. And we extended things like surrender protocols and medical care to the Germans. We didn't do to the Japanese because the Japanese were holding on to grenades and so on, trying to kill our medical corpsmen. So they got a different set of rules because they behaved differently. One was an honorable opponent. Again, I'm excluding the SS, but as far as the Wehrmacht was concerned, general German soldiers fought, as a general rule, as honorable people. And the same thing has been happening all throughout history. So when you're dealing with people who don't fight honorably, who don't have any compunction whatsoever about any of this, all of these voter rolls where Mickey Mouse shows up, and the names of the ballots are Mickey Mouse and Goofy and that kind of thing, those are not for Republican politicians. Those names don't show up on Republican ballots. And I'm tired of pretending that these two things are just two different sides of the same coin and a matter of perspective. They are not. They are qualitatively and quantitatively different, and I'm sick and tired of it. So as far as what my limit is it legal to get this done? Is it a violation of the constitutional authority? Is it constitutionally legal to get that nominee through before the election? And if the answer is yes, then do it.
So, the evil of my rival justifies the suspension of my principles.
Scott, that is an absurd thing to say. This is like saying I'm Julius Caesar and I say Brutus, you're a fine man, you're my closest friend, and I trust you. That's like saying that's something that Julius Caesar would say, and he would not be allowed to have a different opinion after the 15th of March when Judas stuck his dagger in his back. To say that he has to maintain that kind of relationship with somebody who he trusted, who then drove a knife into his back, and to say that it's not honorable of him to change his mind about what he thought about this person is an absurd thing to say.
If politics, therefore, is just warfare by other means, should we not seek out candidates intentionally who are effective at the use of military deception, in essence, so that we're actually looking for people who are excellent liars so that they can corner their opponent and ultimately win a victory? I'm not saying that's what happened in advance this time, but it seems to me if that's the way the game's played, then we should be looking for intentional deceivers or ex post facto justifiers of deception.
What we found a presidential candidate who understands the kind of people that he's up against and understands that the news media is not either the news or the media, that it is nothing like, it's not even a question of it's not being news anymore. Not even a question of that. It's a question of now this being a combined, it is a combined criminal organization designed to achieve political means by not asking Joe Biden what he meant by saying, you need to back up that line one more, this kind of thing. It is absolutely disgusting and disgraceful that these people have forced us to fight them on their level. But we tried this high road. We tried it with John McCain. We tried it with
Mitt Romney.
Mitt Romney. We tried it. We tried it with the race with Al Franken. We just walked away from that. Remember Talia Ferrero? Is that what his name? When he was big scandal. Well after the date for changing the name, it was against the law to change the name. They did it anyway. We just took it. We just took it and took it and took it and took it. And the more of it we took, the more of our freedom they took, and the more of our money they took, and the more of our power that the people should have they took. And now we're dealing with, I'm not talking about every Democrat. I'm not even talking about most Democrats. I'm talking about the Marxist progressives that have taken over this Democratic Party and that are now advocating and promoting
and being
the
supported by half
destruction
the
of their
country.
cities. Well, we're going to find out about half the country real quick.
So
we're going to find out about that half of the country real quick.
So to put a button on
and
this,
if you're telling me that you think that half of the country, if you think that the entire Democratic Party, that if you think that people who are registered Democrats in this country support what they're seeing in Portland and Seattle, you're out of your mind. But that's who they have become.
Well, then,
and that's who we're dealing with.
Either you think that, or you believe that the way you speak about them is a recruiting effort on behalf of the Republican Party.
Scott, I am dealing with the evidence that has been laid out in the last 25, 30 years of political actions in this country. I didn't invent this stuff. I did not invent the Kavanaugh hearings. I did not invent Al Franken continuing to receive mystery ballot boxes that kept arriving until he was over the top. I didn't invent the endless recounts of the election in Florida in 2000. I didn't invent any of this stuff. I didn't invent the weaponization of the FBI against the American people on the part of the Obama administration. I didn't invent any of this. None of it. I just watched it. And I paid attention. And I wrote some things down. And so now I've drawn the appropriate conclusions. And now I know what I'm dealing with. Does it make me happy? It doesn't. It makes me absolutely, insanely, overwhelmingly sad that this is what things have devolved to. But I am not going to watch the Constitution of the United States sail away because I didn't have the courage or the guts to fight for it on the level that it needs to be fought for when you're dealing with people who don't have any respect for the rules.
If, as you seem to suggest, there are no more better angels of our nature left to conjure, how do we get them back?
I don't know. I haven't got the faintest idea. But I'll tell you one thing. There are clear lines drawn now. Really clear lines. You have a party that supports Antifa and BLM, and you have another party that supports the police and the military. And that's it. And so now you have to decide which one of these things would you rather have? What kind of society would you rather live in? Would you rather live in a society that is dominated by endless street protests with buildings being burned down, where physical violence is used to intimidate people? Forget the physical violence, where if you say you don't want to bake a cake for somebody, your life is destroyed. That's one option you have today. That's an option you have. You can vote for that option if you want to, and that's the same option that's provided 8,000 dead black people every single year in the cities that they control. There it is. That's a choice. There's another choice. We're going to find out. But to say that we have to somehow weaken our standards, that we have to say, oh, well, you know what? We're just going to take another one. We're going to watch them cheat again. And this time we're just going to sit there and we're just going to cluck our tongues and say, you know, you guys should be ashamed of yourself, as if they are capable of such a thing. Nancy Pelosi is talking about impeaching Donald Trump again for exercising the constitutional powers in order to put a nominee on the Supreme Court as is outlined in the Constitution of the United States of America. She is threatening to impeach him for him doing his constitutional duty. And this is what we're dealing with. And if you think people like that can be reasoned with or played fair with, you're wrong, Scott. You're just wrong. And when I say you, I mean the position you're arguing. I know you don't feel this way about this. It's so hard. It's just so hard to have to constantly deal with this idea that, well, if you lower yourself to their standards, then there's no difference between the two. No, there is a difference. One difference is I am lowering myself to their standards until this threat is eliminated, at which point I will try to raise myself back up to the standards I had previously. But if you're fighting people who don't have any standards at all, ever, then what's the point? What good does it do to have all of the good people in the world lying dead on the ground because they decided, no, we didn't want to fight back? No. It's beneath us. We're better than that. Better to just stand here and die. Better to just watch the whole thing sail away because of our principles. You want to talk about virtue signaling? There's some virtue signaling for you.
The members of BillWhittle.com have funded this enterprise and continue to do so joyfully because they want to hear serious discussions about these issues, not just straw man arguments and talking points, but real engagement with the rivals' concepts and ideas and principles in a way that is grounded in time-tested principles of our own. If you're that kind of person and you want to promote this kind of discussion, then go to BillWhittle.com and click that big green Become a Member button. And by the way, if it really bugs you the way I ask these questions, even more so, you should become a member at BillWhittle.com. Because the reason it bugs you so much is you don't see very much of this. You don't see the actual interplay of these ideas. You see little clusters of people who all agree with each other, patting each other on the back. This is one of the few places in our society where you can see a legitimate debate over major ideas like this. We invite you to become a member at BillWhittle.com by clicking that big green button for Bill Whittle. I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.